If you took away every video, guide, book, and teacher, what would we have left to help us learn about plants? It's really important to take a step back and reflect on what did our ancestors have to do to survive. We really had to depend on our senses. First, you feel it, you notice it, you feel how soft mullein leaves are, you have this physical experience with the plant, and then you start to interpret what your physical experience with that plant is. It really comes down to feeling something, noticing it, and then deciding what that means. This is the three-stage process that is really a foundation for herbalism. I should introduce myself. My name is Britton and I'm the owner and educator for That Brainy Bee. I have a background in psychology, so love me or hate me, I'm gonna nerd out on this topic a little bit. And I often share how sensation and perception was really my bridge into holistic health and herbalism, coming from that psychological background. Please do not do this, but if you were to touch a hot stove, this is the cascade of communication that is happening inside our bodies without us really noticing it. So when you touch that hot stove, which you are not going to do, immediately your afferent pathway, your afferent neurons are going to say, hey, something is going on. And then our efferent neurons, our efferent pathways with an E, okay, afferent with an A, efferent with an E, these are going to respond and say, hey, take our hand away. I'll explain this pathway a little bit more in a second, but we can see this with like cayenne, for example, in herbalism. It's used as a topical agent. You can see recipes in many different books for like pain relieving, although that is individualized. This is not medical recommendation at all, but you can find these recipes for cayenne. First, our afferent neurons are going to notice that there is something a little spicy on our skin. Our efferent pathway is going to respond to that sensation and say, hey, we're gonna start heating up, we're gonna start warming up. It might also respond and say, hey, we don't like this at all. That's the most simplistic understanding. These pathways are very important for that response, because if you're touching a hot stove and nothing is happening, nothing is telling you to take your hand away, you're not going to have a hand to take away. Now, our ancestors did not have the names for these pathways, but they had an understanding that when you take or use an herb, your body has a reaction to it. So that is a physical feeling that is pretty consistent. Now, moving away from cayenne and the pain properties, let's look at rose, for example. This is a really common flower. When I see rose, it reminds me of my grandma. It reminds me of Mary. It's just this really motherly flower. It absolutely comes down to personal experience, but seeing rose evokes those feelings for me. Moving away from rose, let's talk about lavender. Just the smell and aromatics of lavender are quite recognized across cultures, and our olfactory system and smell is also really involved in this cascade of communication. As soon as we smell those aromatics and volatile oils, our afferent neurons are also responding. I want to expand on the idea of these pathways super quick. We touch the stove, and then that's going to communicate to the nervous system, the spinal cord, and the brain. Then our brain is going to send other signals back outwards, which is when we would pull our hand away from the stove. The same type of communication happens when we use each of our senses. So looking at smell, when we smell that familiar aroma of lavender, our afferent neurons are associated with touch a lot of times. While we can't see it, these small particles are entering our olfactory system, and that's what our afferent neurons are kind of responding to. And according to many research studies, it's our limbic system, the area of the brain associated with like mood and even memory and, you know, just feelings, emotions. So those afferent signals send that to the limbic system, the thalamus, the amygdala. These are going to send pathways back to the peripheral system. So there's this crazy cascade going on. Though I want to be clear that the research is definitely limited for understanding these communications, especially in herbalism. Looking at your tongue and taste, you can taste the bitter qualities of like dandelion root, for example. A lot of these electrical energetic impulses are very very, very fast, you know, moving at like hundreds of miles per second. But the gut-brain axis is among one of the fastest. So as soon as we're smelling that food, as soon as we're tasting it, these digestive enzymes and the gallbladder, it's immediately responding to these sensations that we're experiencing and starting to perceive them, and then sending more signals and responding to those sensations. It's just this really cool thing. I have some other videos about like the gut-brain axis. I have one video about color perception that's pretty old. It is a beautiful, well put together divine orchestra. Now, I mentioned that these electrical impulses are energetic, but I want to talk about how energetics can mean multiple different things. Across methods and systems and cultures, energetics can be associated with signals, especially in science, vitality and force, and then spirit and soul. It can be associated with many different things. In herbalism, energetics is basically a system of observing plants and people, internally and externally. A related term, organoleptics. How does a plant look, taste, smell, feel, and make you feel? We could also associate and connect organoleptics to the 6 tissue state. This is a model introduced by Thurston containing 6 different tissue states. We have excitation, cold depression, atrophy, tension and constriction, damp flowing, damp stagnation, and atonic. And each of these could be associated with a quality of our elements. Now, not elements from like the periodic table, not like hydrogen, but the 4 elements, the 4 qualities of water, fire, air, and earth. And these qualities and states we're connecting through senses and signatures. Speaking of signatures, I want to talk a little bit about the doctrine of signatures, which you may or may not have heard of. This is, I would say, a traditional method of like categorization. It might have been used for some identification. The idea was that a characteristic you can see or notice about either the location, the actual plant, the leaf shape, the flower shape, all of these things, the colors, are a signpost, a divine signpost mark to tell us about what the plant does. I think there can be some truth to this. I absolutely think that these plants are divinely made. However, I know how dangerous this thought process can be for like identifying. It can give us some great insight and be a wonderful teaching tool. So like looking at the location, we might notice how in a dry desert, we can find these cool and moistening plants like prickly pear cactus, for example. Physical properties like hot and cold and smooth and rough are pretty consistent, but when we get into like, oh, this is spotty, it's for this specific disease, it grows in gravelly soil, that means it's for kidneys, it can get a little bit dangerous. The point is that senses drive our experiences. You've probably heard of the 5 senses: seeing, smelling, touching, hearing. But we can expand a little bit on that. There is proprioception, which is kind of like your awareness of your body. Maybe you start to do kickboxing every week or taekwondo. You're gonna have a good sense of your body and where it's at and where you're moving. We can look at vestibular, a sense of balance. Compared to your friend, maybe you're just a little more sensitive to spinning on a chair, for example. Whereas if they are a ballerina, if they are in ice skating, they might have just a better threshold for spinning and spinning and spinning, whereas your vestibular system, your sense, is just a little different. Same thing goes for our proprioception, which is our bodily internal signals, awareness of internal signals. 2 people, okay, both are very hungry. I'm gonna tell you, it's both me and my boyfriend right here. I can tell a lot when I'm hungry. It's an immediate reaction, it's an immediate response. My emotions get involved and they're sending signals down. They're like, we need to eat. Whereas my boyfriend does not notice it as much. Sometimes he like needs reminders that he's hungry and he should eat. I am not like that at all. My senses are high in that. Although I have another video on this, I really want to talk about colors because it's something that I did many papers on while I was in college and I nerd out about this. Let's look at purple. I just did a couple of videos about passion and purple and associated with the crucifixion of Christ. Okay, well, this is the argument. Some people think that purple isn't a color, but it's not it's a non-spectrum. spectral. It's a non-spectral color. Purple is not existent in this world for some reason, but our brains make it up. And so like I'll let you guys do some more research on that, and I'll have resources down in the description box. Color research is really, really complex, especially doing it cross-culturally. Because of something called linguistic relativity, certain tribes, like the Nambia Himba tribe, actually group colors, similar colors together, like what is it called? Baru? Blue and green are grouped together linguistically and called Baru. That's another rabbit hole you can go down. I think I was reading about how Russians can actually interpret different shades of color a little bit quicker than us in a certain research study because of this, because they have like more words or something. I don't know. That's just a little teaser. Individual perceptions of color comes down to contrast, language, culture, age, intensity, saturation, location, and much, much more. In general, our visual perceptions, like with colors, are very subjective, and so is our perception of taste. Looking at my Lover's Squirrel tea blend, which I blended for Valentine's Day, it's only available locally. You can read about it on my blog though. The most common response that I get when people try it is that it tastes floral. But the interesting thing is that floral is not even scientifically a taste quality. You've probably heard of sweet and salty, sour, bitter, and umami. And I don't really know what category floral would fit under there. It could be sweet. Other systems have different categories for flavor. During my apprenticeship, I learned about 10 different tastes, including like astringent, acrid. Bitter is one of the most researched, with investigations into like genetic variants and sensitivity. Recently, I traveled to Texas and I got to see the USS Lexington again. I've seen it a few times before, but this time I got to experience it from a different angle. I was taking lots of pictures of all of the medicine in like the pharmacy and reading about what they would use. I was very surprised to see the almanic vinegar bitters blend. And since I had this mineral mocktails class coming up where I was going to discuss bitters, I was all the more interested in learning more. Bitters and vinegar were quite popular. Digestive issues were a common complaint, but not all sailors could handle the intense bitter flavors. This was discovered by Fox. He was synthesizing some PTC and it got into the air somehow, and he didn't really notice it, but his coworkers sure noticed it and were complaining about the intense bitter flavor. We can have super tasters, we can have non-tasters, and that's another really interesting topic to learn about later. Some think it's, you know, us recognizing potential toxicity in plants and those compounds like alkaloids. And my thought process is, if you have a really bad experience with bitters at first, you might take a long time to even try them again or never come to enjoy them. Whereas if you have an okay experience, it's not like terrible, then you are more likely to try it again. And like I mentioned, age also is involved in this, because as we get older, we are able to handle more bitter flavors like coffee. So philosophies, traditional foundations, and subjective perceptions are the foremost influence in the effectiveness and impact of using plants to support wellness. The thing is, we all perceive and group things differently. So when I say lavender, you might be thinking of this variety which grows and is native to your land, whereas I am thinking of this variety that grows and is native to my land. We have created systems and methods of classification. Carl Linnaeus, botanical taxonomy and classifications, looking at the genus and family. This is a great way for us to have some consistency in identifying plants and clarifying which plants we are discussing too. If you have allergies, it's important to know which family the plant comes from to try and prevent any cross-reactivity with those plants. And then we further categorize them according to methodologies. In homeopathy, for example, we have the statement statement, like cures like, and also the law of similars. So often practitioners will look at your symptoms, look at what's causing the symptoms, and kind of recommend something similar to that. Others might prefer and practice with simples. While I was on my travels too, I learned about curandero Don Pedrito or Don Pedro Jaramillo, a well-renowned folk healer for Texas area. I'd love to do more videos eventually about him. He would often recommend like cans of soup, vegetables, herbs, baths, just these really basic and accessible treatments. Really interesting, but again, you know, they worked for some, many, but not all, of course. Now, cross-culturally, we further categorize our methods. So we have Ayurvedic, we have traditional Chinese medicine, there's shamanism, voodoo, touch, hydrotherapies, flower essence. While there are various methods out there, we can at least see this consistency of vitality, your soul, your spirit, your life force. These observations and methods initially drive our perception until we have our own experiences and exploration and come to personal conclusions. Another example being immunity and like the germ and terrain theories. Now, in modern interpretations, it's honestly better to kind of combine them together, and we have the baby of microbiology. In prior times, it was a huge argument as to how people actually got sick, and holistic health is associated with the terrain theory, and you know, this environment, having a bad environment absolutely drives us to disease or can drive us to disease. So if you are in a moldy home, it's very likely that your body is going to be affected by that mold. Whereas in germ theory, if you are exposed to somebody else sick and maybe you shake their hand and maybe you touch your mouth or something like that, you're gonna get sick. There's some kind of pathogen now in your body. And that's just in like how we get sick. We can also look at different interpretations for healing. So there's something called Herring's Law. According to Herring's Law, the very first symptom will also be the very last symptom. We heal from top down to most vital organs to least vital organs, and everyone is biased, but we can mitigate it by pausing to reflect, countering our initial thoughts, having our own experiences, review history, and practice perspective taking. In using plants, though, we should consult in evidence and reputable sources for our information. Expanding on the idea of bias, I also want to talk about how some herbalism teaches specific plants to be associated with personality types. These methods offer like an intuitive entry point. I don't personally practice through these methods though, because it can introduce cognitive bias unintentionally. And to explain what I mean by that, we're gonna circle back to energetics. So imagine you're walking in your friend's garden and it happens to be by like a swampy area. So you have in the garden bed, you have chamomile and you have catnip, and then you have a little bit of blue vervain over in the swamp. So because of what you've read, you're really turned off by the idea to use chamomile because you don't feel like you're a crybaby, and that's what somebody said. And you might have heard that the type to use catnip would be timid and shy, and you don't feel very timid and shy. You're just really stressed out and dealing with a lot of stuff right now. And for some reason, you know, because you're not sleeping so good, your neck has been hurting. But you read that blue vervain is for the type that is very haywire and just overanalyzing, overachiever, and you don't really feel like an overachiever. So you end up not using any of these plants. When used correctly though, all of them could have been beneficial to you. So it comes down to energetics. It comes down to where you are at seasonally. It does come down to who are you too. Who are you in this season? I mean no disrespect at all. My point is that depending on personality labels, important safety considerations like allergies and interactions could be overlooked. A more careful approach recognizes individual complexity and prioritizes observation and discernment over fixed category. There are many methods and tools to further explore and educate about plants. Sensation and perception is arguably involved in like all aspects of understanding herbalism. It is even involved in vitalism and energetics. To me, this topic is a bridge between the scientific observations in the external world into internal perceptions. And then we further categorize that into methods and systems of herbalism. That being said, be sure to check out my other videos and subscribe if you enjoyed this one. And don't forget that you are loved.